All right, Alexander, let's discuss what's going on with the with our ever-changing society. It seems. Let's just phrase it like that. Our ever-changing system and society that is now being thrust upon us. First, I want to address real quickly the letter sent by Archbishop Vigano. We had a question about this letter that was sent to Trump. Trump tweeted the letter as well, and I think this was a really good development, actually, because anyone that has read the letter should understand that what is happening in the world right now is, in my opinion, without a doubt, a fight against evil. And there's a lot of dark stuff that has already happened in 2020, and I've just resolved myself to the fact that it's not going to end. And this evil is not going to give up, and it's going to continue. And I think it's interesting that this letter was sent by Vigano to Trump. I think it's interesting that Trump acknowledged this letter and he put it out there on Twitter. I mean, there's a message there. There's no doubt about it. There's a message that Trump is trying to convey. The real interesting part was talking about the deep state and then the deep church. And I think as a Greek Orthodox, I can attest to the fact that last year and this year, there is without a doubt a deep state, deep church collusion that is going on. We see it in the schism that's happening within the Orthodox Church and how politics is being used to divide the Orthodox Church in the case of the Russian Orthodox Church, Ukraine, the Patriarch in Constantinople, the Greek Orthodox Church, how it's reacted. All of these things to me just confirms the fact that we are under attack on all levels. And very quickly, Alexander, I will leave you with this quote, and you can comment before we move on to getting into more of the details as to what's happening, specifically in the UK and in France, Boris Johnson and Macron, and comparing those two leaders. A quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and I got this quote from Computing Forever, actually a Computing Forever video. Dave Cullen, it's a great channel. If I remember, I'll put the link for that video in the description box down below. I recommend this channel a whole lot. It's really good. And he opened up one of the videos that he published today with this quote. And I think it's really relevant as to the letter that Trump received and as to what's going on with the protests and the removal of statues and how Boris Johnson and Macron have taken a different approach to it. But this is the quote, Alexander. "To destroy a people, you must first sever their roots. To destroy a people, you must first sever their roots." Alexander.
Well, there you have it. I mean, this is the view that a Christian, an established Christian, someone like Archbishop Vigano, and indeed Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Alexander Solzhenitsyn is, it's important to say, an important Russian Orthodox figure. I mean, he was very much part of the Russian Orthodox world, and of course a historian. And Archbishop Viganò obviously is a Catholic priest, a very senior Catholic priest. That is their concern, that if you cut away the roots of the people from their own history, they cease to be, if the people that they are, they become something different, which you can then manipulate and change into something that you want them to be. And of course, from Solzhenitsyn's point of view, that was what basically happened with the Russian Revolution, that the Russian people were cut off from their millennial past as, you know, a people built around orthodoxy, Slavdom, all of those things, that they became instead a part of a new system of scientific communism, which essentially rejected and deleted that past. And Vigano is essentially saying something that like that is happening now. And he uses some extremely powerful language in that letter. He talks about, you know, this existential struggle that is continuous between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, and how, you know, there's Satan on the one side and there's God on the other. And he's also talks about, you know, the fact that these are the forces of darkness, if you like, which we're seeing now. And he brings this all together with other issues, particular political issues about the fact that, Donald Trump is protecting the right, the right to life, if you like. So he's, opposes abortion. That he's making in effect a political point in support of Trump also. So it's both a religious statement, it's a political statement, and it's also a comment about the events which we are seeing unfold. So quite a powerful letter from a very senior member of the Catholic hierarchy, a person who until 2016 was the Pope's ambassador to the United States. So a very, very powerful discussion. And you're right also to bring up the question about the deep church and the deep state. We've seen that with the way in which parts of the church, in both the Catholic Church, also, of course, I'm sorry to say, the Orthodox Church, have become distorted. They've become servants, if you like, of a political process rather than a religious one, which is what both Solzhenitsyn and Vigano say the church should be, with the church focusing instead on its religious mission and its religious message, which is unchanging and perpetual. Whereas, as I said, others want to see the church change its message in pursuit of political power and in alignment with political forces today. So a very powerful message. And of course, Donald Trump, who has an election to win this year, as you correctly say, he signaled it. He's given it prominence to.
That's the amazing part, is that we wouldn't have known about the letter if Trump.
No, we wouldn't. No, we wouldn't have known. We wouldn't have known about it. But of course, from Donald Trump's point of view, it's a useful thing. First of all, I'm sure he was pleased with the letter anyway, because, as I said, it must be very gratifying at a time when he's under attack from so many directions to find that there's this very powerful and influential voice from within the Catholic Church speaking up in support of him. But it also enables him electorally to reach out to Catholic voters, to more conservative Catholic voters, to say, look, I have the support of this powerful figure, conservative figure within the Catholic Church. And also, you hear me all the time being described as this evil person, this, traitor, all of those sort of things. But as you see the Archbishop say, I'm none of those things. I'm actually the person who stands for our history, our constitution, our system of government, our form of civilization, and our religion. So it has a powerful political effect for him too.
Yeah, it adds a different dimension as well. I mean, the fact that this letter was sent to him and it's framed in the way of good versus evil, I think it adds a lot more weight to the battle that's being waged, and that has been waged against Trump over the past 3-4 years and is being waged now. I think it may serve to calm Trump down, in that, the minute you understand, or you're getting this letter which is telling you, look, I know what you're going through. This is bigger than you. So keep fighting the war, because, this is, you're a piece to a much bigger puzzle here. And, there's other forces at work. I think that's going to help Trump as he moves towards re-election. I think it puts things in perspective.
Well, it will certainly help him. It'll give him a tremendous psychological boost, because, as I said, he's now been told by one of the most senior people in the church, the Catholic Church, that he represents, as I said, morality and the Christian message, and his opponents don't, and that he is in the right, and it's his opponents who are in the wrong. And they're not just in the wrong, they're wrong in these existential terms, part of this great cosmic battle between right and wrong, good and evil, God and Satan. He's on the side of God, a religion, right, truth, good. And it's the other side, his other side are on the side of Satan, wrong, falsehood, and evil. So from his point of view, having been faced with 4 years now, because it all began during the 2016 election, are being continuously and relentlessly criticized as this, sort of evil person. To be told these things by such an important cleric within the Catholic Church must be hugely comforting for him.
Right. Okay, so now let's move on to good and evil here as far as the way they're handling the protests that are going on in Europe, specifically in the UK and in France. Macron and Boris Johnson. Let's go to an article via Jonathan Turley, and a liberal lawyer, an American liberal lawyer, but I think he frames what's happening right now really well. And he calls his article A Tale of Two Cities, London and Paris Divide on the Preservation of History. Let me read you the first three paragraphs here. We have been discussing the destruction of public art and history monuments by mobs who are often allowed to carry out such acts without police intervention, a problem that pre-existed the current protests. It was particularly alarming to see statues defaced or destroyed in London, including, bizarrely, a statue of Abraham Lincoln. The response in London and Paris is strikingly different, but in this tale of two cities, it is London that seems to be surrendering to the hysteria of the moment. Protesters often faced no intervention in London as they defaced public art, and later, London Mayor Sadiq Khan announced that he would yield to demands to take down statues of imperialist figures and create a commission to, quote, review and improve diversity. In his statement, Khan said that he no longer wanted to see statues, road names, and public spaces reflect a bygone era. He declared the Black Lives Matter protests have rightly brought this to the public's attention, but it's important that we take the right steps to work together to bring change and ensure that we can all be proud of our public landscape. To that end, he said that the city would replace historic statuary with Black and Asian minority ethnic communities, as well as women and LGBTQ community and disability groups. I've previously discussed my love for London and its rich history. As a history nut, walking around London is an overwhelming and inspiring experience. To see the response of Khan to his destruction and his plans to remove historical monuments is terribly distressing. I have long supported adding to historical monuments to bring greater context and diversity. This, however, seems like a pledge to remove history, literally from the streets of London. Over in Paris, the response has been very different from French President Emmanuel Macron, who vowed to stand with history and resist efforts to down statues of controversial or colonial-era figures. Macron showed incredible courage in refusing to rewrite the history of France and declared, quote, the Republic will not erase any trace or any name from its history. It will not take down any statue. Instead, he insisted that, quote, we should look at all of our history together with lucidity. Macron is 100% right. Isn't it interesting, Alexander, that the adult in the room at this very moment in time in Europe is French President Emmanuel Macron? I find it very, very disturbing. A slap in the face to every citizen in the United Kingdom, to every historical figure that has created the country, that has created the UK, that Sadiq Khan made such statements and that he wants to erase the entire history in the name of diversity and BLM and all this stuff that Sadiq Khan has in his head. Who is Sadiq Khan to decide these things?
Well, he's not going to be able to do these things because I should say straight away there will be massive opposition if he does anything like the kind of extraordinary program that he's talking about. Sadiq Khan is a rather unsuccessful mayor of London who is at risk of losing an election. He has lots of support in London from ethnic voters. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to solidify their support by essentially talking up the BLM program and setting himself forward as an advocate for it. I think it's a disastrously misconceived approach. I think it'll backfire on him in the election. I think it'll antagonize and upset more people than it wins over. But the alarming thing is that it's even been talked about. And the even more alarming thing is that instead of the entire country saying, Sadiq Khan, what are you saying? You must be off your head for so thinking in these extraordinary terms or talking in these extraordinary terms, his comments have gone by with virtually no real comment or discussion or anything. I mean, it's as if he's able to talk in this way and people just nod their heads quietly to themselves, but they don't really stand up and they don't have the ability, it seems, any longer to talk him down and to say what you're doing is wrong. And I can't help but think that this shows again the contrast between Britain, a country with a long history, a very peaceful history, which is not perhaps had the experience of revolution, and a country like France, which most definitely has had a long experience of revolution, and which has learned as a result that lesson which Solzhenitsyn was talking about, which you mentioned before, on the importance of holding on to your past, not just part of your past or those parts of the past that you want to emphasize, and certainly not to create an entirely new version of the past, but the past that was, and to hold on to all of it. So if you go to Paris today, you will see wonderful statues of French kings, of Louis XIV, of Louis XV. You will see statues of Joan of Arc, for example. And you will also see, of course, on the top of the column of the Place Vendôme, you will see Napoleon there, and you will see other monuments celebrating heroes of the French Revolution, celebrating Napoleon and his generals, celebrating Napoleonic victories, all in juxtaposition with each other, the Republican monuments, the Royalist monuments, and all the rest. And this is being said by a president who clearly comes from the liberal tradition in France. I'm using very qualified words, from the liberal Republican tradition, but he's not going to erase any names, any part of French history. He's not going to attack any monuments in France. He's not going to support any of that. And he's taking a stand, and that's a popular stand in France, because, as I said, the French have the knowledge of what happens when history is rewritten, when names are erased, when statues are toppled in that fashion, which the British so far don't. They don't have that experience. And as a result, in the kind of climate that we are in at the moment, they don't yet have that resistance to these kinds of extraordinary statements that we're seeing happening at the present time.
Yeah, they're absolutely extraordinary. I quote, to review and improve diversity, to create a commission to review and improve diversity, to take down statues of imperialist figures.
Yes. Well, if you
wanted to see one more quote. I'm going to read the quote again so you can comment, because I read these quotes and I'm absolutely stunned that he's saying this about the country he's a citizen of. Yes. He no longer wanted to see statues, road names, and public spaces reflect a bygone era.
Yes.
A bygone era.
Well,
what does that even mean?
Well, it doesn't mean
history.
Anything.
That's your history. This is the country you live in.
Well, it is. It's wiping it out and replacing it with another view. I mean, it's an anti-history. It's an anti-history position, a position that history, the past, is something to be ashamed of. Certainly not celebrated, and should be wiped out because it's bygone, it's in the past, and what we want is a modernity, it's a new world. So, I mean, why stop with statues in that case? Why not knock down all the churches? Why not knock down all the famous buildings? Why not knock down Parliament, the House of Commons, Westminster Abbey, St. Paul's Cathedral? St. Paul's Cathedral built, by all sorts of merchants and people like that who no doubt, Sadiq Khan, for various reasons, would not approve of. Why not flatten them all and replace them with something entirely new? Why does it stop at statues? And which statues? As I said, you start with Churchill, you can go on to Nelson, you can take in the Duke of Wellington, you can take in King Charles I, who sits at the top of Whitehall. You can just go on all the time. You won't have anything left. You can completely wipe it all out. You can start again. Now, can I just say something? Coming back to Solzhenitsyn, I mean, there were actually projects to do that in the Soviet Union in the especially immediately after the revolution. If you go to Soviet museums, to Russian museums in Russia, especially, you see all these artworks of that time that were created in the 1920s and 1930s. There was actually a program that you knocked down everything that existed, all the palaces, artworks, statues, and all of those things, and you start all over again. And of course, an awful lot was destroyed. The remarkable thing is how much survived. And the reason it survived was that even some of the Bolshevik leaders said, no, this is something we cannot do. The past matters to us. It is important. But Sadiq Khan is going to go further than the Bolsheviks themselves did, than the Jacobins did in France. And I mean, when you think about it, it's got quite awesome implications. He is far more of a revolutionary in the end, judging by his words, than even they were. And that's saying something.
Well, he's onto something. So like you said, let's take it further. Here's an article from RT. The title goes like this, by Chris Sweeney. By the way, wrote this article. And this is what he has for the title. Once the statues are all dethroned, should we tear down the BBC, the Mail, and the Guardian with their Nazi and slavery links? ? Alexander, why not? Tear them all down.
Absolutely. Well, quite. I mean, one of the sort of, one of the more amusing things is that there's a sort of campaign at the moment. I think it's a tongue-in-cheek campaign, saying let's scrap the Guardian, which is the great centre newspaper that demands that is very much supporting BLM and is actually supporting the statue toppling campaign, because the Guardian was set up by a man with whose wealth came from the West Indies, from indeed slavery, and it supported in the 1860s the South in the American Civil War. So if your actions today are to be judged by what happened, what you did in the past, or what your predecessors did in the past, well, that of course condemns the Guardian, so it should be scrapped too. And of course the BBC, which was, let's remember, very much an entity when it was created of the British Empire, and whose first famous chairman was Lord Reith, who had very imperialistic views. So let's scrap the BBC also. Let's scrap everything. Let's start again. Let's no longer have a United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Let's not call it, a kingdom. Let's do away with the monarchy, everything. Start anew, knock down everything, begin afresh. Because if you go down this road, there is no logical endpoint to it.
Yeah, sanitize it all. We'll just have buildings with white walls, white ceilings, white floors.
Well, not
everything
white.
Completely sanitized. Well, sanitized like a hospital. You know what I mean?
I know.
Everything just sterile and sanitized.
Well, absolutely, exactly. Which offends no one, supposedly. But of course, that's the other absurdity of what Sadiq Khan is saying, because he says he wants something that will offend no one. But of course, what he is proposing is actually going to offend lots of people, because lots of people in Britain care about their past. I mean, the British are, by and large, believe it or not, a patriotic people. They are very linked to their past. They remember their past heroes. They have their own stories, their own narrative, and by all means add to it, correct it, point out, that Nelson, as well as leading the British fleet at Trafalgar, had, was pro-slavery, for example. He supported the slave trade. By all means, add to it. But, scrap it all, do away with all of these people. Most people in Britain certainly do not want to see that. And as I said, what these people are actually doing is it's going to provoke a massive reaction. And I think that in Sadiq Khan's case, not only is he playing with fire, but he is playing with electoral fire in London itself. I suspect a lot of people in London, which is, to be very clear, a left-wing Labour voting city, are not going to be happy with what he's proposing at all.
Shame on him. If you hate, your country's history, get out, leave.
Well, of course. I mean,
you don't like it, leave.
I find it
go somewhere else.
I find it incomprehensible to think in that way. I mean, if I may say so. I mean, I'm Greek. I'm very conscious of the history of the Greek nation that goes back millennia. I take huge pride in the fact that I'm connected to all of this, to the world of classical antiquity, that I speak that language, that I can go around Athens and see the monuments that were built then, that I can see the monuments that were built under the Byzantines, the churches, all of this is very much part of who I am. I'm also British. And again, I'm able to walk around London, as you rightly say. I'm able to see these things. I'm not oblivious to the realities. If I look at a statue of Clive, who was the British general who conquered much of India, of the kind of things that Britain did in India, I'm an anti-imperialist, but I take note of the presence of Clive. That reminds me of what Britain did in India. That way I am more aware of it, not less. Can I just point out that some of these people who wanted to bring down the statues of Clive, Clive of India, they also are now talking about bringing down the statues of Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, the man who led India into independence. Because when he went to South Africa in the 1890s, he had entirely conventional views at that time about black people, views which he completely repudiated and entirely changed. But you do away with Clive, you would deal away with Gandhi. You don't know anymore what your country did in India. It's no longer part of your history. It's no longer part of your present reality. And of course, all of that is gone. And you live in a state which has no history anymore, except that which people have constructed for you. I think it's very sinister.
Yeah, they're already starting in the U.S. by taking down statues of Jefferson. Now they're talking about taking down statues of George Washington. So they're already starting in the U.S.
Well, indeed. Well, I mean,
just leveling the entire history.
Well, let's talk. I mean, we could take it even further in the United States. I mean, why stop? Why not change the name of Washington D.C.? I mean, George Washington was a slave owner. He was very embarrassed about the fact, by the way, he wanted to free his slaves. He was talked out of it by members of his family, but he did free them in his will. But the fact is, he was a slave owner. So why not change the name of the capital? Why chip away his statue on Mount Rushmore? Or Abraham Lincoln expressed views about black people, which today would be completely unacceptable and inappropriate. He was also the man who led, the United States in the Civil War, the northern states in the Civil War, who passed the Emancipation Declaration. Why, however, stop at it? Why not come after him too? As I said, he had these disturbing views, as we would say, about black people. Take him down. Just do away with the Lincoln Memorial. Do away with everything. Start again. Year zero. The only people who did it, as I said, were the Khmer Rouge. But the way people like Sadiq Khan talk, you'd almost think that's what they were about also. Mm-hmm.
That's the plan. That's the Solzhenitsyn quote, isn't it?
You
got to sever the people. You got to sever us. That's the plan. It's not about the history or the culture per se. It's not that, they're so against it or so for it, or it offends them so much. The plan is we need to separate the people from their past and from their identity. Once we can do that, then we can control them and it's game over.
Well, you can mold them. You can make them into anything you want. As I said, they cease, by the way, at that point. I mean, it's just as it's impossible, I think, for American people to understand the phenomenon of slavery if they've got no statues from Lincoln and Jefferson and all of those people. I mean, if you erase all their statues, erase all that past, then, as I said, you can't understand slavery. Just as if you erase the empire from the consciousness of Britain, then of course what the British did during their empire, which you may be totally disapproving of, you can't debate that either. You have, however, a population cut off from its past that you can change into whatever you want. That's obviously the plan. It's not going to work. It's insanely overambitious, but it's very disturbing that there are even people who are talking about it. And it shows you what a very strange and disturbing place we've come to.
It's a transhumanist plan, and it's a three-pronged attack, if you ask me. It's you sever the people from their identity, You humiliate them, so you make them kneel, you make them wash feet, you make them do all these little passion plays that you're putting out there for the people to watch. So you humiliate them.
Correct.
And eventually you scare the hell out of them with, wear a mask, don't touch people, be afraid of sicknesses and illness. So you take away the emotional human connection as well. So you just render people as these interchangeable parts.
Well, I mean,
we're nothing anymore. We're nothing. We're pixels on a screen. We're nothing.
There is an awful lot, of course, coercion in all of this. And this is an important thing to say, because, I mean, there's another very interesting article by Jonathan Turley in which he talks about the huge intolerance that has now developed within the academic world, and how the whole concept of pluralism and freedom of speech in the academic world has been done away with as this is being driven forward. So, it's a lot of people who no doubt disagree strongly with Sadiq Khan are afraid of speaking out, because if they do speak out, as I said, the Twitter mobs and all of that will come after them. So that there is an element of coercion fear. And I come back to saying it. I mean, the recent countries like France and indeed Russia. I was talking to somebody from Russia today. Not from Russia Today, the channel, but who lives in Russia. They were telling me the same thing, that in Russia people have already been through all of that. They've experienced statue toppling. They've experienced the attempts to rewrite and erase history, to change history, to make it conform to the needs of certain people in the present. They don't want. They've seen the damage it does. They don't want to go there. They don't want to have parts of their history disappear again, just as happened in France. By the way, in France, during the French Revolution, during the period of the so-called Terror, there was the Terror during the French Revolution. That was exactly what was happening. People were being disappeared. Their history was being taken out, and people were being excised from the historical narrative. And that happened again in a climate of terror, and that has left a very strong sense in France. You don't want to go there again. You want them all there. You want everybody who has existed in your past. You want, because you're connected to all of these people. They make up collectively who you are now. It's the same in Russia. It's the same in France. It's also the same in Britain and the United States. Only there's some very dangerous people in Britain and the United States who don't want to accept that.
Yeah. Oh, they won't win.
They won't win. They cannot win. I mean, it's impossible. It is extraordinary that it's even been talked about, as I said, and it's very frightening, actually. More concerning that people are not able or are too intimidated to speak out against it.
Yeah. Well, they tried to, in the case of Russia, they tried to silence wipe away the Orthodox Church for 70 plus years. Didn't work. It's now back stronger than ever.
Well, of course not. Absolutely.
They can't win.
Well, and indeed, in the Second World War, they had to call on it again. So, it's always there. So, as I said, it'll never, you can't just make people into something different from what they are. And, you will always have continuities with the past, however much you try. But the attempt, the fact that we see people in Britain and the United States talk in this fashion is extraordinary. And I'm going to make some other point, by the way, quickly, which is that I suspect that an awful lot of people who are opportunistically climbing onto this bandwagon at the moment secretly disagree with it, but are afraid to say.
It's sinister. Anyway, all right, Alexander, we'll leave it there. And go to the Duran shop, pick up some mugs, donate to PayPal, Patreon, Subscribe Star. Also go to Patriotic Legacy, Duran 20, pick up the Patriot Beacon. Mm-hmm. Awesome flash. But I just want to leave it here, Alexander. I'm going to give you the night off on promotion because I want to announce the winner of the contest for the Patriotic Legacy. It is Charlotte is the winner in Iowa, in the U.S. in Iowa. Charlotte, you have won the contest. The Patriotic Legacy will get in touch with you for you to claim your prize. Congratulations, Charlotte. That's it. Until next time, everybody, take care.
Congratulations, Charlotte.
Congratulations, Charlotte. Take care. Bye-bye.
From all of us at the Duran.